Greetings, comrades. We continue discussing the program of the Zimbabwe Communist Party titled Completing the Liberation of Zimbabwe. In this short video, we are looking into the armed struggle because there are different narratives about the armed struggle, and as communists, we want to put this into perspective. ZANU-PF says that the armed struggle started in 1966 with the heroic attack by ZANU combatants, ZANLA forces in Chinhoyi, which was Sinoi by then. Of course, this is not correct, but we pay tribute to the ZANLA cadres that fought in Chinhoyi in 1966. But as we are saying that this is not correct, it is not a correct version from ZANU-PF, but as communists, we pay tribute to the gallant fighters from ZANLA who fought in Chinhoyi in 1966. There were, of course, extensive sabotage operations of government facilities as far back as in the 1960s under the National Democratic Party. You remember that we spoke about when we discussed the National Liberation Movement, that at some point we had the National Democratic Party. When it was banned, then ZAPU was formed, or the party was then named ZAPU. So, but we also note that the Chinhoyi military operation was a once-off. The first serious armed challenge against the Rhodesians took place with the Wank and Spolilo campaigns launched jointly in 1967 by the Zimbabwe People's Revolutionary Army ZIPRA and the Umkhonto weSizwe MK, the armed wings of ZAPU and the ANC. The relationship between ZIPRA and the MK was signed in blood. The relationship was forged in the battlefield. We have always said that political alliances are forged in battlefields. Alliances that are forged in boardrooms do not hold. So the relationship between ZIPRA and the MK was forged in the battlefield, which of course sealed the relationship between ZAP and the African National Congress, ANC, which of course after the Unity Accord of 1987, the African National Congress then entered into an alliance with the ZANU-PF, and which it continues to support, even though ZAPU pulled out of the Unity Accord in 2009. And we said in the previous video that we will at some point discuss the pullout of ZAPU in the context of the ZANU-PF ANC alliances. So the beginning of continuous armed struggle by ZANLA began with the attack on Altena Farm in December 1972. So after the 1966 Chinhoyi battle, there was some quiet in the battlefield until 1972. And of course, because we know that at this time, ZAPU and ZANU had split, forming ZANU. And of course, there is a lot of misinformation out there, particularly directed at the late Dr. Joshua Nkomo, who was said not to have had any interest in waging an armed struggle, but evidence points to the contrary. We also recognize in our program as the Zimbabwe Communist Party and respect and honor the leaders, the nationalists that were arrested from 1964, I mean to say, to 1974. Quite a number of them were held at Gonagonzingwa detention camp, the likes of Dr. Joshua Nkomo, Josiah Chinamano, Joseph Msika of ZAPU, Ndabaningi Stole, Edgar Dekere, and Robert Mugabe of ZANU, and the other senior leaders from both the two liberation movements. They went through difficult times, they went through torture, they went through isolation. And we commend them for the contribution that they did in the struggle for national liberation during that time. But also, during the 1960s, ZAP was without question the main liberation organization. Of course, this was to change in stages during the 1970s. With Nkomo in detention, there was a further split within ZAP. Personal hostility between James Chikerema and Johnson Ziapapamoyo led to Chikerema breaking away and forming the Front for the Liberation of Zimbabwe, Frolise, together with the ZANU members, the likes of Nathan Shamyarira. Later, Flores had to merge with the ZANU. It had to retrace its roots. Nathan, they have to retrace their roots to ZANU. But of course, the split in ZAP in 1963 also meant that ZAPU or ZIPRA could not get military bases in Mozambique. President Nyerere of Tanzania influenced President Samora Machel of Mozambique to give military bases in the liberated area of Tete province in Mozambique to Zanla instead of ZIPRA. Once Mozambique became independent in 1975, the whole border area, the longest border that Zimbabwe has with any other country and a border of mountainous and forests, became open to ZANU guerrillas. Despite the political weaknesses of ZANU, these were conditions were used intelligently by ZANU. While ZIPRA had to deal with the mighty Zambezi River, to cross the mighty Zambezi River to infiltrate what was then southern Rhodesia, ZANU forces had to cross mountains and across the forest into Zimbabwe from Mozambique. It is at this time that ZANU conducted what was called the Pungwe, where civilians will be asked to attend political meetings. Some say doctrination happened in those meetings. I was very young. I attended quite a number of those meetings in our area. We used to, with my late grandmother and my late my late uncle would go to the mountain to give ZANU cadres food. We will sing in those meetings. It was at those meetings that I first come into contact with the Shona speaking, because I grew up in an area which was wholly Matebele land, and I began to learn about Satsa Neuku, because the guerrillas only wanted pap and the chicken or meat. If you were to give them vegetables, they would refuse. So I was a toddler at about 9 years at the time. In March 1975, senior ZAPU leader Herbert Chitepo was killed in a car bomb in Lusaka, which was put by the Rhodesian agents. But of course, there was a commission that was established by President Kenneth Kaunda to establish the circumstances under which Herbert Chitepo died. Comrades can read in detail, because Professor Masipula Stole, in his book Struggle Within a Struggle, gives a detailed account of what happened in Zambia at the time. He speaks also in detail about what is called the Nari rebellion. In our program, we only do a summary. We are not giving a detailed account. So comrades who want to do more research should read the book by Professor Masipula Stole. That speaks in detail about what happened. But at the time, 1974, 1975, ZANU president Ndabaningi Stole was losing popularity. They had to come up with a compromise candidate among the ZANU factions. And that candidate was Robert Gabriel Mugabe, who was released from detention in 1974 together with other leaders. Also in the book by Professor Masipula Stole, he gives a detailed account on how Mugabe and the rest of the ZANU leadership, together with the leadership of ZAPU, traveled to Lusaka to attend the meetings that were organized. As the 1970s progressed, the armed guerrilla struggle by both the ZANLA and the ZIPRA intensified. The threat of a full-scale invasion by the heavily armed ZIPRA army in Zambia prompted Zambian President Kenneth Kaunda, concerned about a full-scale war about to be launched from his territory. He contacted the British Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, asking her to take action. It was then that Lancaster House talks were held, which then brought an end to the armed struggle, or which then facilitated the ceasefire that then happened. Of course, we always discuss the attitude of Dr. Joshua Nkomo when the Soviet Union advised him not to attend to the Lancaster House talks. They preferred that he could walk armed, that is the ZIPRA, the armed wing of ZAPU, and take over Harare militarily, or Salisbury as it was then. But of course, the nationalists, as led by Dr. Joshua Nkomo, went to Lancaster House, and we all know what happened. So Joshua Nkomo, who is considered as the father of the national liberation struggle in Zimbabwe, came second in the 1980 elections, which we will discuss in the next video as we look into the post-Zimbabwe after 1980, or post-independence in Zimbabwe, or majority rule, on what happened, which will be tracing the economic fall of Zimbabwe as we are going through an economic crisis currently. But it was important that we give a brief account of the armed struggle in Zimbabwe. Please share your views. Like we said in the previous video, that comrades from ZIPRA are assisting in giving us an account on what happened, and hoping that it is going to be documented. We want to hear more from ZANLA cadres on their own experiences on what happened. We want this to be documented. We want us, as of course some of us are no longer the youth, but we want the youth and our children to study the correct history as written by our freedom fighters. We will continue discussing the program of the Zimbabwe Communist Party. Otherwise, comrades, please like the video, circulate and subscribe. I am Ngabuto Nicholas Mapena, General Secretary of the Zimbabwe Communist Party. Amandla, comrades.